Welcome back, Focus Learners. We're jumping straight into a brand new explainer today, and we are unpacking a really fascinating framework from a piece called The Architecture of Uncommon Success. If you're looking for a structured, highly efficient way to build a high-leverage career, or really just a uniquely fulfilling life, you are absolutely in the right place. We're coming in with a ton of energy today because the core argument we're about to explore, it's nothing short of a complete paradigm shift. The text basically argues that to win, and I mean to achieve truly outsized, uncommon success, we have to completely stop looking at the crowded, comfortable lanes of consensus. We have to rethink our approach from the ground up. Because honestly, if we don't, we risk spending our entire lives just sprinting on a treadmill, burning maximum energy only to stay in the exact same spot as everyone else. The brutal truth of following the crowded lane is that you're just constantly fighting for scraps. But the uncommon path, that is where the leverage is. That's where true independence actually lives.
Right. Let's dive into the core thesis here. The author lays down this unyielding strategic law right off the bat. If you simply do what everyone else has already done, you will be rewarded with the same mediocre results everyone else has already gotten. Think about that for a second. Duplicating standard societal playbooks just out of sheer inertia isn't a path to greatness. It's literally a guaranteed recipe for mediocrity. But why is that inertia so incredibly dangerous? Well, mostly because it feels really deceptively productive. When you follow the well-worn path, going to the exact same schools, applying for the exact same prestigious jobs, starting the exact same type of trendy business, you feel like you're doing everything right. You're ticking all the boxes. But structurally, you're really just joining a massive herd. According to this text, the only true model for success is to actively avoid most of the world's models for success. You have to somehow break the gravitational pull of the average. And that brings us to a pretty direct, maybe even a little uncomfortable question. What is something of value that you are willing to do that most people are not? The source points out that real success requires some intense introspection. It's not just about working hard, it's about working differently. So, what is something you actually enjoy doing that others utterly dread? Or maybe what's a thing you're naturally gifted at that most people just simply aren't? This might be a highly technical skill that takes years of lonely, quiet focus to master. It could be a willingness to do incredibly tedious, mundane audits that save a company millions, but would literally bore regular people to tears. Or maybe it's just your willingness to look completely foolish for a little while as you figure out a brand new industry. Figuring out the answers to those questions is the absolute fundamental first step to getting off that conveyor belt of average results.
Okay, let's look at the math behind this. Section 1. The economics of the contrarian bet. To really understand the underlying economics of this theory, we need to introduce a concept that maps perfectly to what famous investor Peter Thiel calls the contrarian truth. Basically, if you want to build an outsized business or a totally unique life, you simply cannot do it by competing head-on in incredibly crowded fields. Think about a traditional path for a second. You enter a crowded field, which naturally means extremely high competition. Because there are just so many people perfectly willing and able to do the exact same work you're doing, the rewards get completely diluted. I mean, it's basic supply and demand, right? Massive supply drives the price of the asset, in this case, your labor or your business, straight to the floor. But conversely, consider a contrarian path. Here, you're actively looking for inefficiencies where the supply of people willing to do the work is near zero. Because there is virtually zero competition, you achieve monopolized rewards. You become a category of one. These are asymmetric wins, where the potential value is absolutely massive simply because you aren't forced to split the pie with 10,000 other people.
So you might be wondering, why do so many highly intelligent, really capable people get utterly stuck competing for pennies? Well, it's due to what the source defines as the consensus trap. When a model for success becomes widely accepted and feels safe, capital and talent immediately flood into that space. Think of your standard institutional career tracks, corporate law, investment banking, or whatever the absolutely hottest tech trend is this week. Human nature naturally gravitates toward these models because they offer a perceived lack of risk. There's a clear roadmap, and hey, everybody respects the title. But the mechanics of this trap are actually incredibly brutal. Because the space is completely saturated with top-tier talent, the effort required just to win increases exponentially, while the actual payoff scales down to almost nothing. Following the popular path, no matter how prestigious it might look from the outside, fundamentally fails the individual. You just end up burning all your energy to keep from falling behind rather than building actual sustainable leverage.
To escape this trap, you have to seek out what's called the alpha of discomfort. The most valuable opportunities in life and business are almost always hidden behind massive walls. We're talking walls of intense friction, pure unadulterated boredom, incredibly high cognitive load, or sometimes even deep social stigma. Most people intuitively understand this on some level, but because these things are distinctly unpleasant to experience, they quit the absolute moment they hit these walls. They just retreat right back to the comfort of the crowded lane. Therefore, if you are the one individual willing to swallow that specific type of friction, you effectively wipe out your competition in one fell swoop. You get to monopolize the upside simply because you endured what others wouldn't. The discomfort isn't a barrier to your success. The discomfort is the actual moat protecting your success from everyone else.
Okay, so here is the crucial point. If this strategy is so elegantly, mathematically sound, why do so remarkably few people execute it? Seriously, why is the pull toward the crowd and its mediocre results so incredibly irresistible for the vast majority of us, even when we consciously know better? To really understand that, we have to cross over from economics and talk about biology.
Which brings us to Section 2, your brain hates standing alone.
So, the real villain of our story here isn't the economy. And surprisingly, it's not your competition either. It's actually our own Paleolithic brain. Our neurology literally treats nonconformity as an existential death sentence. The text calls this the tribal alarm system. Just think about our evolutionary history for a minute. For nearly all of human existence, being cast out of the tribe didn't just mean you had a bruised ego. It meant freezing or starving to death out in the harsh wilderness. It was a literal death sentence. Because of this, your amygdala is hardwired to constantly monitor your standing within the group to ensure your survival. So today, when you actively choose to reject the world's standard models for success, your brain interprets that social divergence as a major survival threat. In the present day, even though you obviously aren't going to be eaten by a predator for starting a weird niche business or choosing an unconventional career, your amygdala still floods your system with cortisol and anxiety. It is desperately trying to force you back into the physical and emotional safety of the crowd, prioritizing your short-term survival over your long-term success.
And this creates a truly fascinating and deeply challenging psychological dynamic. Our brains heavily favor collective delusion over public failure. Humans can surprisingly easily tolerate being completely wrong as long as everyone else is wrong right alongside them. Just think of historical financial bubbles or crazy corporate groupthink. If the entire industry tanks, well, you weren't singled out. It feels emotionally safe to fail as a group. But what our nervous systems absolutely cannot handle is the searing risk of standing outside the consensus and failing all by ourselves. Public failure triggers all those ancient tribal alarms we just talked about. The source strongly emphasizes that it requires immense, deliberate psychological resilience to override this evolutionary hardware. Building this resilience means consciously practicing small acts of divergence, normalizing that weird feeling of being misunderstood, and reframing isolation not as a terrifying danger zone, but as your absolute primary point of leverage.
All right, let's get practical. Operationalizing the contrarian play. Now that we actually understand the biological hurdles we're up against, how do we put this into practice? Well, it comes down to a clear 4-step blueprint to help you step off the crowded highway. Step 1, audit your current commitments. Take a hard, really honest look at where you might be blindly duplicating standard societal playbooks just out of sheer inertia. Are you in your current role because you genuinely love it, or just because it was the next logical step on a really predictable ladder? Step 2, identify emotionally safe crowd behavior. Find one specific area in your industry where the crowd is running in a uniform direction simply because it feels comfortable. Step 3, ask yourself, what is the exact inverse of this behavior? For example, if everyone around you is building broad, generalized software, the inverse might be building hyper-specific, deeply unsexy niche tools. And finally, step 4, swallow the friction. Identify the precise discomfort that's keeping people from doing that inverse behavior, whether it's a steep learning curve, the tediousness, or just the fear of looking foolish, and lean all the way into it. You have to be willing to hack your way through the brush to monopolize those rewards.
So I'll leave you with this final, ultimate question you have to answer for yourself. Where is the unclaimed territory in your life? And honestly, more importantly, do you have the hardware to claim it? The blueprint for uncommon success really isn't some closely guarded secret, but it does demand an incredibly rare combination of clarity and courage. It demands recognizing that the very friction that makes you want to quit is exactly what makes the opportunity so valuable in the first place. If you can find that friction, and if you can manage to quiet your Paleolithic brain just long enough to endure the discomfort of standing out, that is exactly where your true leverage lies. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer on the architecture of uncommon success. Take a really hard look at the playbooks you're running this week, challenge the consensus, and I'll catch you next time.